And then slowly you start to do suspensions more outdoors, like in a tree. And this one was in Canberra in
Yes.
92, where you was in the middle of a tree and then you suspend and do kind of what I interpreted for that picture was kind of static suspensions.
Yeah. It was a static suspension. The difficulty, it was really difficult because this was done in Canberra as part of a performance festival. So other artists did other kinds of performances, but um, we searched for 3 or 4 days to find a tree where the branches would allow me to, to suspend my body. It wasn't so easy to find an appropriate tree. And then this was this was titled prepared tree suspension. So in other words, what we did was we exposed the roots of the tree to make the tree more symmetrical. So the branches were visually mirrored by the exposed roots. And instead of suspending the body from the branches themselves, the cables went from the body over forks in the branches and were tied to the roots of the tree. So visually, it was the tension between the body and the tree was circular. You know, it wasn't just I wasn't just hanging from the branches. I was actually supported by the root the roots of the tree. And the plan for this performance was that I convinced the organizers that because there was an invited audience, I think there were about 400 people. Um, but before the people arrived, there were more cows in near the tree than there were people, of course. But I convinced the organizers that if I could hang for 15 minutes, uh, I convinced them then that I would tell people to leave, and they didn't want to do that because they wanted the people to see all of the performance. But uh, I wanted to be alone, hanging from the tree in this landscape, which was Black Mountain in Canberra. And so after 15 minutes, I said to one of my assistants, please tell people to leave. And at first, people did not want to leave, but gradually they began leaving. So the last image that they had was to see the body suspended in the tree. So this was the plan. And then after about 30 minutes, I decided that I should come down. But then when I kind of opened my eyes and looked around, there was no one there. My assistants had also left. um, Fortunately, they were not very far away. They were just hiding behind a kind of a gully and some other trees. So finally, they realised they had to come back to let me down. But it was very awkward to suspend the body. We needed ladders, and it was not so easy. The other problem with this performance was that the hooks were inserted when I was lying underneath the roots of the tree. Unfortunately, there were angry ants. We had disturbed an ant's nest, and so whilst two people were inserting the hooks, there was another person keeping the ants off my body. So this was an unexpected problem, which we didn't realize at the time.
For example, when you was doing this kind of complicated suspensions where the rigging uh, is really difficult to do it, when how you was working with this concept? You was meeting with the people and try to make the plan so you have the idea,
Yeah.
and then how to develop that idea to make reality.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I tried to imagine uh, what problems there might be and to have some solutions. And then I would meet with my assistants who had agreed to participate in the performance, and we discussed what the possibilities, what the problems might be. But really, there was no testing beforehand. You know, you did it once. You know, the rock suspension, we didn't know it was going to actually succeed until it happened. Like the process was very interesting with that. I was sitting on the gallery floor, and we did the insertions. And when the insertions were all done, already we had suspended a ring of rocks from eye bolts in the ceiling, and with slip knots. And then those cables were connected to the hooks. And when everything was ready, I yanked the cables, releasing the slip knots. And then as the rocks came down, my body went up. And of course, not evenly. So when the rocks stopped, they were a little uneven. So I kind of jiggled my body, and then the rocks became roughly even. Um, so I had invited for that performance 9 people, and at the end, each person held 2 rocks, because this performance was not so high. It was only about a meter and a half off the floor. And as they raised the rocks up, my body went down low enough for someone to cut the cables, and I would kind of gently fall to the floor. So there was we couldn't test this performance beforehand. So you just had to plan it as best you could.
Mm.
And no performance really failed. I mean, there were problems, but we mostly anticipated or overcame the problems. Like the seaside suspension, this was from an outcrop of rocks about 300 meters from shore. And when we arrived earlier in the morning, it happened to be low tide, and we could easily wade through the water to the outcrop of rocks. And we had to build a structure that would support my body. But we had a really difficult time uh, uh, making that support structure fixed, because the waves were kept moving it. We had to jam it between the rocks, and finally we were able to do that, but it was very, very sort of unsteady. It wasn't really strong, and the upper uh, piece of wood was bending noticeably. Um, when we were ready, though, to do the suspension, uh, the tide was coming in. So my assistants had a hard time connecting the cables and dismantling the structure underneath me, because the waves were kind of beginning to crash over them. And it took them 5-10 minutes to get back to shore. And the waves were crashing over my body during the suspension. I was suspended side on, looking out towards the horizon. And the only people who saw this performance, aside from the 4 or 5 people who were helping, were some fishing boats that were going past. And there were a group of fishermen on another outcrop of rocks nearby. They were fishing before we arrived. They kept fishing during the performance, and they were still fishing when we left.
For example, in this specific suspension, I believe it was really complicated to do it. But how you was over the rocks, and then the people connect the cables and then pull you up.
Oh, no. What we did was we constructed like 2 tripods and a plank of wood that my body could be positioned on top of. So my body was supported. So there were 2 tripod structures. The one that my body was suspended from, but also a lower one where my body could lie on.
Okay.
Yeah. And so what happened was when everything was ready, they connected the cables to my body, uh, tensed the cables as much as they could. So the cables were tensed, and then they collapsed the tripods and the support. And so then my body was visibly suspended.
Okay.
So that wasn't hoisting the body, that was removing the support from underneath the body.
So in some ways, like what normally we do now with the cube suspensions, when we put the bench, we put the people, connect all the rigging
Yeah.
line, and then put
Yeah.
the bench down.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so that was the beginning of that.
Well, I think these were sort of commonsensical solutions to suspending the body. It's interesting when I met Javier Fiel it was in Copenhagen, I think, the first time I met him, but I really didn't know much about the contemporary suspension community, and I was intrigued that some of these positions, like the horizontal face down or the sitting position or the had kind of special names. So that was kind of interesting. Um, but of course it was really fascinating to see um, some very new ways of suspending the body that have been uh, developed and realized by people suspending now.
Yeah, the evolution of body suspensions in the last, I can say, 10 years is huge. It's a huge difference with all the gear, the techniques, the asepsia is completely something new. But for the people who don't know so much or they are not too much into body suspensions in the 70s, 80s, 90s, was the beginning of body suspension, the contemporary body suspensions, and of course the pioneers, including you. They experiment, they do the best they can with the knowledge they have in that time, and
Yeah.
of course the suspension community start to grow more, where get involved different people like professional piercers or people who work in the medical or riggers, professional riggers. So that's the way how this suspension start
Yeah.
to have a huge evolution. And it's something also in your suspensions where normally you was focused just in body suspensions, but then you start to you did one with the third hand. That's called the third hand
Oh, yes.
suspension. Can you tell and
That
explain
was
a
that
little
was
bit?
actually
Yeah.
that was actually supposed to be the last suspension. But in fact, yeah, there were several after that. Look, the interesting thing uh, was that I began the third hand project, engineering the third hand, in the same year that I did the first suspension in 1976. But it took 4 years to complete the third hand. And I was performing simultaneously, sometimes using my third hand and amplifying my body signals and sounds, using lasers and high tech stuff at the same time that I was, um, doing these early suspensions. So, in other words, at the same time that I was kind of exploring the psychological and physiological parameters of the body through suspensions, there was a desire to augment the body with technology, and in this case, the third hand. And I thought that for the last sort of suspension, it would be interesting to incorporate the third hand as a kind of transition, you know, um, because I thought I had exhausted all of the possibilities. I'd done suspensions in different positions, in different locations, in different situations. And I thought, well, there's no reason artistically to do any more suspensions. But I thought it would be interesting to do one with the third hand. So we did this in Ofuna in Japan at an abandoned monorail station, right? Which was still a station, an ordinary station, but it was an abandoned monorail station. And we connected a motor, and I, with a control box, I could hoist my body up and down, right? My body was suspended horizontally, but not evenly, right? And my third hand was connected, which I could control with electrodes on my muscle, on my abdominal and leg muscles. So there were electrodes connecting and allowing me to actuate my third hand. So, and also I had electrodes amplifying uh, my 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 vocal cord sounds. So this performance was one in which not only was I hoisting my body up and down using a kind of a motorized hoist, but I was also controlling the movements of my third hand, and the sound of my third hand and the sound of my vocal cords were amplified acoustically, right? Um, and so what was interesting was, again, we didn't invite people, but there was a local audience that happened to notice what was happening. And the only other people who saw the the performance, or who might have seen the performance, were people going past on the train. They would have seen this naked body suspended by hooks. But you know, this was not the only performance where I amplified body signals and sounds. So, for example, in a very early performance where I was suspended within a tensegrity icosahedron, this was a tension structure, I amplified my blood flow and heartbeat sounds. And then in Los Angeles, in Espace DBD, I amplified my muscle signals. So in that performance, people could pull my body, they could interact with my body and pull my body into different positions. And as my body moved in different positions, like for example, lifting my back leg up or hoisting my right arm up or lowering my left leg or whatever, as they were contorting the body, I had sensors amplifying my muscle signals. In other words, amplifying the tension. You know, making these kinds of amplified sounds. So some of the performances were not only moving, but also amplified body signals. And then, yes, as you said, the last performance was at that abandoned monorail where I also incorporated my third hand.
So when you was making this sound in some way, maybe it was the beginning of the noise music.
Well, I was, I'm not so sure about that, but certainly I've always been interested in using sound in my performances. I feel sounds register the movements. So, you know, but also I was interested in not having ambient sounds, but rather incorporating the sounds of the motors, of the crane or my third hand, amplifying my body signals and sounds. So I did a whole series of performances amplifying my brain waves, heartbeat, muscles, blood flow. So generating a cacophony of sounds. So the performance began in these cases when the body was switched on, and the performance ended when the body was switched off.
And talking about the third hand, always I got fascinated for this concept you built. Of course, was with some collaboration of other people to working together, but that was your idea. And what I believe in some way, that was the beginning of the modern prosthesis. In because to work with this with waves and the muscular reactions and the mind and
Yeah.
whatever, in some
Yeah.
ways, like what's happened now with prosthesis.
Well, I have to say that, of course, when I thought that a prosthetic hand might be an interesting way of kind of, multiplying my hands and becoming an interesting visual addition to the body. I did some research about what was available in prosthetic devices, but the third hand had wrist rotation, thumb uh, and um, finger open and close and pinch and grasp actions, but it also had a tactile feedback system for a rudimentary sense of touch. And I was able to feel the pressure of the hand gripping the object. And in fact, uh, it was sophisticated enough at the time to get invitations from the Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena and the Johnson Space Center in Houston to demonstrate the lab to the extravehicular activity group. So it was considered a fairly sophisticated device at the time. This was the early 80s. It was finished in 1980, and that was when I began performing with the third hand.
And after the long break with the suspensions, uh, you explain you as like you try a lot, different positions, different locations. So you have a long break for doing body suspension performance.
Yeah.
Why you start to get involved again in body suspensions after this long break?
Well, well, there were two reasons. Personally, individually, I with my ear on arm project, I did a large sculpture, a 4 meter large sculpture of the ear on my arm. And one performance I did was just simply lying on this sculpture. And whilst I was lying on the sculpture, I thought, whoa, it would be interesting to suspend my body above the sculpture. So you have this guy with an ear on his arm suspended above a large sculpture of an ear on an arm. And so this is 25 years after the last suspension. I decided to do one more and to suspend my body above the sculpture. And in that performance, I knew that when my body was hoisted off the sculpture and the steel cable took the full weight of the body, because the steel cable is braided, you know, as it supports the full body weight, it begins to untwist. And as it untwists, it begins to spin the body. First slowly, and then faster and faster, and then it slows down, and then it spins it the other way. So I knew this was going to happen from previous performances, but I thought perhaps the spinning would last for about 5 minutes. The spinning lasted for about 15 minutes. And so that performance began when the body was hoisted off the sculpture, and it ended when the body touched down on the sculpture again, after about 15 minutes. As I said, the time was determined when my body stopped spinning effectively. That was the first reason for, doing another suspension. And if there's some extraordinary reason for me to do another one, maybe I would, probably not. But when I met Hervé Fiel in Copenhagen, I had mentioned that I'd always been interested in doing a multiple body suspension, but when I was suspending myself, there wasn't a community of people suspending that I knew of anyway. This was in the 70s and 80s, but I always wanted to do a multiple body suspension. And when I met Javier, he said, well, there are people now who will suspend, and so we did a performance together, a spinning, sighing performance. We amplified the people's vocal cords, and they were spinning during the suspension, and they were counterbalancing each other. So two female bodies counterbalanced one male body, for example. Counterbalancing this cluster of spinning, sighing, suspended bodies. It was, I think, a really beautiful suspension event. So, we sort of designed the performance, and of course there were riggers and piercing professional piercers who could, or Javier was one of them, who could realize this performance. And this set up several other multiple body suspensions that we did together. So again, it was due to this interest that I had of multiple body suspensions. And also it was great meeting the suspension, people in the suspension community. What was interesting, though, was that they were reluctant to perform naked. They were willing to perform suspended, but not so happy about suspended and being naked. We convinced people that was the way to go for these particular performances.
Yeah, it was in the first one in Oslo, and I don't remember which year, but it was maybe like 10 years ago, could be 8, 10 years.
Oh, look, I'm not really, life is a bit of a blur, you're doing so many things and dates and not. But, I have to say the publication Stretch Skin, which was published by Javier Fiel, PS Media, is really the publication that documents not only my individual performances, but also the group suspensions that we did as well.
And yeah, you can contact Hove or check the Wind of Desires website, and then you can order your book over there. I have my copy.
Yeah, and I think there are still, there are available publications. I mean, the original Obsolete Bodies book is difficult to access now, and it's sold at a very expensive price in Los Angeles. The bookstore that I went into there was selling it for about $900. There's very few copies around, but in a way, this more recent publication will be more valuable because it documents all of the suspensions.
And about the first book, I sorry, I forget completely the name of the first book.
Obsolete Body
Obsolete Bodies.
suspensions. Yeah.
How you how difficult was to publish a book about body suspensions in that time?
Well, it was very difficult. A friend of mine who I knew in Japan, an American friend, Jim Paffrath, who unfortunately passed away recently, he sort of wanted to start up a publishing company, and he'd done some books, and because we became friends and he was interested in my work, he kind of offered to publish a book on the suspensions, and I think we printed 5,000 copies at the time. They were never. We had a lot of trouble distributing, the books, and we didn't really find many venues. Even alternate bookstores would not carry the book, and it was sort of done on a kind of person-to-person contact, and So a lot of the books went, were never distributed properly. And yeah, they were in Jim's garage for many years. Boxes of these books.
I know it's really difficult to find it and super expensive. So yeah, good luck if you are looking for. Yeah, I was looking for that book since many years, and always the prices are insane, super super expensive. But like you say,
Well,
the
I would honestly offer you, yeah, I would honestly offer you a copy, but I think I've only got one hard copy and one soft cover copy for myself now.
and about the all your work with body suspensions, this kind of robotic and media or technology working in together to make it a performance was something I believe in some way was like a little bit uh, of how you say like uh, contemporary for that time. And how you got the support of the art, uh, to produce all your art? You have some help from organization,
Yeah.
government.
Mm. Well, a lot of these projects and performances were self-funded or were done with people who just assisted me because they were interested in participating. Um, of course, the suspension events generally weren't um, very sort of expensive to do. You only needed to purchase a set of stainless steel hooks. The fishing shop in Japan, in Tokyo, where I would buy the hooks regularly, um, they thought I was some big game fisherman. uh, I don't think they ever found out that I was an artist who was suspending his body. But you know, as the performances were uh, more and more technological, there was some funding from arts bodies, but uh, a lot of my cutting edge performances and projects, like for example, I really didn't get adequate funding to do the stomach sculpture, or it took 10 years to find 3 surgeons and to get funding to do the ear on my arm project, to surgically construct an ear on my arm. Um, the Blender project, again, we never got funding for that. The Propel project, where my body was connected to the end of an industrial arm, there was some money available um, from Symbiotica in Perth. They got a grant from the Arts Council, but they kind of portioned some of their grant to my performance. So it's always been a problem. You know, a lot of these performances were done with minimal funding and done with people who assisted you because they were interested.
And what's your next project?
Well, I'm working on a project for the new Science Gallery in Melbourne. This is a large interactive robotic installation. It'll be about 9 meters high, about 7 meters in diameter. It'll be interactive online, so anyone, anywhere can access the robot and remotely control it. Um, so it's a kind of more complex project that involves the assistance of an architect, an engineer, and programmers. that's the kind of present project that's being realized. It'll be ready for an exhibition titled Swarm, opening in Melbourne in February 2022. So next February. Um, it's kind of really interesting because it's an anthropomorphic structure comprising of pneumatic rubber muscles, tendons, cables, a tensegrity structure, a circulatory system of compressed air. So it's kind of anthropomorphic without being figurative, if you understand
Yeah. Wow.
my explanation.
So in February next year, 22, will
Yeah,
be
yeah.
ready.
You'll be able to see the robotic installation streaming live, and then you'll be able to use the camera on your laptop or desktop computer, and by making different gestures, you'll be able to move the robot. You'll be able to generate swarm algorithms that animate the robot structure.
Nice. So for the people who want to know more about your work, do you have some social media or website where they can look for?
Yeah, I certainly have a website that's generally updated. It's Stelarc.org, so www.stelarc.org, O-R-G. There is a Facebook page. There is an Instagram, but, some other friends have initiated an Instagram for me, and I'm not really all that active on social media, but the website is probably the best way, and occasionally on Facebook. You just have to search for Stelarc. You'll
Um,
find it.
to finish, you would like to say something to the new generation of suspension facilitators?
Oh, I mean, I think it's really interesting to see a community of body modification and body suspensions, because I think in this kind of increasingly video, virtual, and vicarious age that we're now living in, to reassert the physicality of the body, um, to experiment on your own body, is increasingly important. And this is happening now. And it's very interesting to see the kind of creativity and the physicality and the sort of dedication to body modification and body suspension that is happening now.
And to finish, you would like to add something?
Oh, I think I've spoken enough. I think what's interesting is not really what you say, but what you do. And I think with all of these activities, ideas are easy. It's actualizing these ideas in some physical way that is important.
So thank you so much for being here, for accepting to share some time with us. And I want to say thank you also in the name of all the body suspension community and my also from myself. Like you did amazing work and you get inspired of what we can do. You did suspensions in the 70s when the most of us was like just a few years old. less of 10 years old, and really, like, I'm from 74. The first suspension you did was 75, so I was like 1 year old. Yeah, you have a long history in body suspensions. You did a lot, and also I really appreciate you get close to the suspension community in the last years and share and work together and meet you and spend some time with you. I really appreciate that, and I want to say thank you again for everything you do. I wish you all the best.
Oh, thank you very much, Beto. It was great speaking to you. Thanks.
And if you are agreed, I will keep this conversation. I will put it online. I will keep it in the Instagram. I will tag you so the people who don't have the chance to watch this, because this is offline, so they can watch it and share it and listen to you.
Excellent. Excellent.
Thank you so much, and wish you all the best.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. And please keep in touch.
Yeah, I will.
Okay. Thanks, Beto.
Thank you. Bye bye. So.